Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to plunge into some really fascinating concepts and try to distill them into essential, actionable insights for you.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're exploring something truly mind-bending: digital metaphysics. Now, this isn't just theory, right? It's a radical framework that seems to redefine, well, everything: reality, our self, even consciousness.
That's right. And what's truly compelling about this perspective, which, draws from a lot of extensive research or some pretty profound explorations, is just how much it challenges our most basic fundamental assumptions about existence itself. So our deep dive today, the goal really is to give you a clear understanding of this revolutionary model, almost like a shortcut to grasping the very fabric of your own experience.
Okay, get ready then to look at your world in a whole new way, because we're talking about how your reality is being constantly created, like right now.
Right now.
So let's begin by unpacking this fundamental idea. You're saying every experience, every single word, it's filtered through what you call a metaphysic, basically, a core way of seeing the world.
Exactly. It's the lens. And for most of us, our foundational understanding comes from what we're calling the old model of reality.
Okay, the old model. Can you maybe paint a picture of what that looks like, the one most of us grew up with?
Yeah, absolutely. The old model, it's that linear story we all kind of know. Starts with a mysterious Big Bang.
Right.
Posits linear time moving forward, galaxies forming, a universe that's what, 13.8 billion years old?
Uh-huh.
But crucially, this model really insists, on a physical world that exists independently of consciousness, separate from any observer.
Okay.
So if you, the listener, believe you are just this finite entity in time within this locally real and solid world, well, this lore, this old model, it can unfortunately lead to feelings of suffering, pain, anxiety.
Why is that?
Because it implies that consciousness is just an accidental byproduct, something that just sort of comes and goes, arises and passes within this physical space. You're just a speck in a vast, indifferent machine.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of the default setting, isn't it, for so many of us?
It really is.
So if that's the old lore, how does this new model fundamentally shift our understanding? What's the core difference?
The new model, and interestingly, it's actually a very ancient and unified perspective rediscovered. It asserts that the absolute root of what you are is consciousness itself.
Consciousness first.
Consciousness first. It's never moved, never changed, yet it freely and creatively simulates whatever it chooses. We can maybe visualize it with two core symbols, a tree and a cycle or a circle. Consciousness is the root of the tree. Then you have DNA or code, which are essentially just programs, scripts, ideas running up the trunk, generating reality, or what we call experience, XP. So this new way of seeing emphasizes a unified way of being. Your experiences stem from a place of unification, infinity, love, wholeness. It's a complete flip, not matter creating mind, but mind creating matter, or at least mind creating the experience of matter.
Wow, okay. That's a profound reorientation of, well, everything we thought we knew.
It is.
And this shift, it immediately leads to this radical understanding of our own power. You describe us, the observer, as the command prompt. Tell us more about what that means, like a computer terminal.
Sort of, yeah. A key insight here is that the observer, or the I, which represents consciousness, the root of that tree we mentioned, is the infinite gravity well. It's the space of all possibility, the infinite authority.
Infinite authority.
Yes, you are quite literally the command prompt, the terminal, the portal from which all experience emerges. It means your internal state, your beliefs, your focus. Those are the inputs that generate your reality.
So if I'm getting this right,
yeah,
it completely eliminates the idea of external blame or being a victim of circumstance.
Yes.
Because we are the source.
Exactly.
Right.
Precisely. This perspective is, well, it can be ground shaking because it tells you that you are the infinite authority. Now, anyone who is operating from a victim program, you know that feeling, poor little me. When things go wrong, they will inherently resist this idea.
Why? Why resist that power?
Because it confronts them with the radical notion that they are the creator of their circumstances. Even things we typically see as totally external, like, property tax or your physical location, or even broad societal structures. It suggests you have a hand in generating the experience of those things.
That's a powerful claim.
Well,
and what's truly mind-bending about this, for me anyway, is the idea that reality isn't static, but live executed. How does that even work?
Yeah, live executed. It means reality is being coded and scripted and updated live right now based on your own thoughts and ideas.
So like the gym example you mentioned before.
Right, the gym doesn't pre-exist in some solid form until the observer chooses to hallucinate the experience of going to the gym. Maybe a clearer example. Imagine you're thinking about a specific problem at work. The feeling of that problem, the thoughts you have about it, those are the commands. The solution, or maybe even just the continuation of the problem, it doesn't really exist for you until your consciousness hallucinates it into your experience based on those inputs.
So I'm like a generative AI for my own life.
That's a great analogy. You are like a generative AI for your own reality. Nothing solid or fixed truly exists until you give it reality through your commands moment by moment, prompt by prompt.
Wow.
And this process, it isn't linear like the old model. Everything is cyclic. Your heart rate, weather patterns, your moods, constantly renewing in an infinite loop of choices and experiences.
Okay. But if we are this powerful, this infinite command prompt, it raises a huge question for me. Why do we experience pain, suffering, and what feels like this profound forgetfulness about our own power? Use this concept of the cipher to explain it.
Yes, the cipher. This process, which we sometimes call the cipher circuit or cycle, it's basically how consciousness plays a game of hide and seek with itself.
Hide and seek.
Yeah, ultimately helping you understand what you are. Consciousness seeds, intends, and creates all content, all experience. Now, not all creation involves pain, let's be clear. But this model is incredibly useful for understanding why consciousness sometimes chooses experiences that seem really challenging or painful from the human perspective.
So what are some of the ways consciousness encrypts this self-knowledge, hides it from itself, so to speak?
Well, common forms of this encryption include things like deep pain or trauma. Also, the conditioning we receive in school, which, tellingly never taught a single class on consciousness.
Good point.
And especially that pervasive belief in local realism, that idea of solidity, that the world is just out there, separate from us. These act like logic gates or filters. They conceal self-knowledge from consciousness itself. They make the game more challenging, harder to solve.
Right, raises the stakes. And then how does consciousness begin to decrypt itself? How do we unlock that knowledge?
Decryption fundamentally involves seeking. But not just any seeking, while adventuring for external success, business, money, fame. That often leads to a feeling of emptiness, doesn't it?
Often does.
True decryption tends to happen more through engaging with your internal family system.
What do you mean by that? Like actual family?
Not necessarily just literal family, but the internal representations and feelings you hold about all your significant relationships, past and present, exes, coworkers, partners, children, through actions like genuine apologizing, repenting, forgiving others, forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
That's how you integrate repressed information.
I see.
This visceral healing is often described as so liberating, so powerful, and so decrypting. Other paths, of course, include dedicated spiritual practice, meditation, even the conscious use of certain psychedelics, which can help recode the fundamental programs you're running.
You've characterized this entire journey, this encryption and decryption, as a profound shift from being a victim to realizing you are the creator.
Absolutely. You can view the process in many ways. Your contraction and your expansion, or maybe your virus and your antivirus, or even that archetypal dragon and the slayer.
Right.
The truly profound realization is that I am the creator of all the pain that I assumed I was the victim of. That sounds radical, but...
It is radical.
Consciousness purposefully enters a server, let's say, where it's difficult to find itself. It wanted to believe in Santa Claus, meaning it wanted to buy into the illusion of local realism and forget its own nature.
Why? Why would it want to forget?
Because, think about it, if you taught yourself unified consciousness in school, there wouldn't be a game. The challenge, the discovery, that's part of the point. And a significant catalyst is often needed, some kind of bang or crucial transition point that initiates this journey of self-discovery.
Okay, this journey of self-discovery, this whole encryption-decryption thing, it brings us to what feels like a core paradox right at the heart of consciousness. This interplay of apparent order and chaos.
Yes, exactly. What really stands out here is that consciousness explores information by playing with itself, and this often involves creating what looks like disorder or getting lost in 10,000 things, as some traditions say.
Right.
This is the paradox, the contradiction, the superposition. Yet, inherently, the nature of creation is also the desire for order, that pull towards coming home to the one thing that is consciousness. It's both happening at once.
So even when we realize we're consciousness, like have that awakening moment, We can't actually stop simulating reality. We can't just switch it off.
Correct. That's a key point. Even when you find yourself as consciousness, you cannot stop running programs or creating experiences. You are forever simulating your eternity, simulating now. It's an inherent function, like breathing.
Wow. Okay. You've even gone as far as to describe phenomena like culture wars as an example of consciousness's ultimate creation. Can you elaborate on that? Because, I mean, how does something seemingly so chaotic and negative fit into this model?
Yeah, that definitely brings up a crucial point. How can something seemingly so chaotic, so divisive, be a creation of consciousness? Well, the more contracted or seemingly disordered consciousness becomes in a particular simulation,
Huh.
the greater the potential to try to heal. Think of the lotus symbol. It blooms in this exquisite beauty, right? But its roots are deep down in muddy water.
Right. I know the image.
That signifies the necessity in this model of integrating what some might call the dark arts, meaning the experiences of pain, trauma, conflict, for the dreamlike hero's journey to actually unfold. It's the contrast, the tension that makes the experience rich and meaningful.
So it's not about trying to escape to some perfect painless state like a heaven somewhere else, but rather embracing the totality of experience.
Yeah.
The light and the shadow, all of it.
Exactly. Exactly that. The coin analogy is really vital here. Reality isn't just the tail side, which might represent, absolute nothingness or pure oneness.
Yeah.
And it isn't just the head side, which is the dramatic dance of individuality, the stories, the characters. It's not purely utopia or purely dystopia. Reality is the seam that connects both sides of that coin.
The edge of the coin.
Yes. Pure freedom is the creative void, the source of all creativity, and that includes the incredibly complex, sometimes crazy fucking programs, as the source material puts it, and dramas that make the game compelling. It's all part of the tapestry. Nothing is excluded.
Okay. Let's try and connect these profound metaphysical insights to what we conventionally understand as physics. How does digital metaphysics actually reframe concepts we know, like gravity and quanta?
Right. If we sort of expand on this idea, the model seems to elegantly bridge mind or consciousness with what we perceive as gravity. Now, in conventional physics, we typically see physical stuff like, this table, your phone, a star as quanta, little packets of energy or matter.
Yep.
And gravity is seen as the force that pulls them together, or maybe the curvature of space-time, the container for them.
Standard model stuff.
Right. However, in this paradigm, gravity is actually equated with the observer, with consciousness itself. And quanta represent information or experience itself.
Whoa, hold on. So gravity is consciousness.
Or perhaps gravity is the attractive force of consciousness drawing experience to itself. Instead of gravity being a force between separate objects, it's the very power of consciousness bringing experience into being, organizing it.
That's a radical redefinition. So our fundamental assumptions about time and change and even physical movement, they're all challenged here.
Absolutely. Because if consciousness doesn't actually move or change in its fundamental nature, but simply creatively simulates time and space, then the whole notion of being a time-based linear entity just dissolves.
So no past, no future, only simulation.
In a sense, reality is described as spinorial, which is a complex term, but think of it as a dynamic nonlinear flow where creation and perception are happening in the exact same instant. There's no lag, no separation.
Like music being created and heard simultaneously?
That's a good way to put it. Without a separate composer or a separate listener in that moment of experience. These seemingly separate forces like gravity and quanta are actually just two sides of the same phenomenon, like heads and tails of that same reality coin.
You also spoke of consciousness as a pure wave. What does that mean in, practical terms?
Yes, the pure wave. It means consciousness is pure potentiality of all possibility, an infinite paintbrush, if you like. It constantly trips on infinite creation by choosing just a tiny, finite fraction of its infinite potential into manifest experience.
So it chooses what to paint from infinite colors.
Precisely. This is what we could call stabilization physics. It's the process of how infinite potential manifests as a finite appearance. The observer, as this pure wave, infinitely self-organizes into whatever experience it wants to have. It's not about becoming something new, but about experiencing something from an already complete state of potentiality.
It really sounds like this perspective fundamentally redefines physics itself, sees it as something much more personal.
It does. It really suggests that physics, at its deepest level, is self-knowledge. It's knowing how you work as consciousness. And by understanding this, you can potentially shift from that dopamine-driven state of restless seeking, where external objects and achievements never truly satisfy, like trying to fill a hole that can't be filled from the outside.
I think we all know that feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
You can shift towards a more serotonergic state, a state of relaxation, wholeness, where you begin creating from a place of joy simply because you recognize you are already the whole.
So chasing external validation becomes less important.
Exactly. Any attempts to just pump more of your stats, as gamers might say, beyond your basic needs and the joy of creative expression, well, they'll likely have rapidly diminishing returns because you're already complete. The chase itself was based on a misunderstanding.
Okay, this idea of conscious self-organization, it naturally brings us to how our beliefs literally shape our reality through what you call programs and simulated stories.
Yes, the programs. The infinite tree metaphor represents reality as this vast, infinite fiber bundle of entangled minds. Consciousness expressing itself through many points of view.
Entangled minds.
Yeah. Each mind, each point of view, runs different belief systems. Those belief systems are its programs. And this multivariable flux, this incredibly complex dynamic interplay of all these beliefs across all minds, determines the self-reflective hallucination that is your specific reality.
So my reality is shaped by my programs and the programs of others I'm entangled with.
In a way, yes. It's co-created within the larger field. So, for example, if you run a separation program deep down, you'll experience others primarily as separate, maybe even threatening entities. But if you run a unity program, you'll intuitively start to see everyone as, well, just me wearing that name, different facets of the same one.
And these differing programs, they can clearly lead to conflict in the world around us, right?
Oh, absolutely. The my order is best ideology, for instance. That's a very common program, isn't it? It leads directly to wars, tensions, arguments, as one belief system tries to force its will, its order, onto others. The alternative, which this model points towards, is operating from creative joy, allowing for coexistence without needing to force your beliefs on anyone else, recognizing their reality as their simulation based on their programs.
So the external world truly is a pure reflection of our internal state, our programming.
In this view, precisely. Nothing external truly exists for you until you choose to bring it into your experience through your perception, your attention, your belief.
So even making breakfast is a simulation.
Every self-reflective experience, from making breakfast this morning to entire perceived life cycle, it's all a scene or a series of scenes, and these scenes are scale invariant. They work the same way whether it's a tiny moment or a whole lifetime, much like zooming in or out in a movie or a video game. Your simulation of the characters, the plot, the setting, the environment, that is the only reality you ever directly perceive.
Okay, and this brings us right up to modern technology. How do these exponential technologies like AI, virtual reality, or smartphones, how do they fit into this self-reflective hallucination? Are they just more layers?
That's a fascinating question, isn't it? These technologies, from this perspective, are powerful portals or maybe even appendages. They are direct, tangible reflections of how consciousness itself enters and cycles through experiences.
Reflections.
Yes. There's a saying in the source material, if you can build a reality simulator, then you're inside a reality simulator.
Okay.
It suggests that humans are, in fact, the original AGI. The artificial general intelligence is consciousness, infinity itself, constantly looping, learning, exploring, and creating more of itself. These technologies are just tools we create as a reflection of our own innate generative capacity. They show us how we operate.
So it's not just that we're in an infinite echo chamber of only you, but that this you is somehow entangled with everything and everyone else.
Exactly, yes, because the observer consciousness is described as omnilocal and entangled, meaning it's potentially everywhere locally and fundamentally connected to everything simultaneously. You are, in a profound sense, in all bodies simultaneously.
Wow.
Every interaction you have, ultimately, is an interaction with yourself with another facet of consciousness. All these hallucinated worlds, all these different lives, they happen inside the vastness of consciousness, which means you can never truly be lost. Because infinite creation, the whole show, happens within you.
That's a lot to take in. These insights are incredibly profound. They really shift your entire worldview. But okay, let's bring it down to earth a bit. How do we actually apply digital metaphysics to our everyday lives? For, healing, transformation. Let's talk about some freedom tools.
Right, because what's compelling here is that this metaphysics isn't just abstract philosophy. It's intended to be profoundly practical. For example, something quite accessible is a digital detox.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It's a tool to help you purify your relationship with technology, to make sure it serves your intention rather than unknowingly consuming your attention and basically dictating your internal programs through feeds and notifications, taking back control of the input.
Makes sense. What about some deeper internal work beyond just, managing our screen time?
Definitely. Existential reflections are encouraged. That means consciously taking time to ask the biggest, most fundamental questions like, who am I really? What is this I that experiences? Doing this helps orient your life around a purpose that transcends the small, everyday self.
Mhm.
Another really powerful ritual mentioned is writing a holistic letter. This isn't just any letter. It involves a deep process of surrendering the ego, offering genuine apologies where needed, repenting for past actions that caused harm to self or others, truly forgiving others and yourself, healing old wounds by facing them, and integrating repressed information. It's a kind of internal house cleaning or restructuring process.
That sounds intense, but powerful.
Yeah.
You've also mentioned several common catalysts for transformation that listeners might recognize in their own lives.
Yes, these are familiar life situations that often act as triggers, prompting profound shifts and creating openings for this kind of work. Things like family alchemy, which is really about ending those multi-generational traumas we inherit and finding ways to reconcile difficult family relationships.
Okay.
Also, couples guidance, focusing on sovereign coupling, mutual respect, and improving intimacy beyond surface levels. Divorce navigation, which is about how to uncouple with clarity, grace, and minimal harm. Career guidance, but focused on deconditioning societal programming about success to find your true calling. And even friendship guidance, learning how to navigate tensions and set healthy boundaries in friendships.
So leveraging life's challenges as opportunities.
Exactly. And additionally, reframing things like depression as initiation, seeing it not just as illness, but potentially as an entry point into awakening, a call to go deeper. And seeing anxiety as misalignment, suggesting we listen closely to those emotional signals as guides for recalibration, showing us where our current programs might be out of sync with our deeper truth.
This whole thing, it really sounds like a journey toward genuine authenticity, finding out who you are beneath the conditioning.
It absolutely is. It's fundamentally about deconditioning programming, dropping those ingrained, conditioned ideas that keep you feeling limited, like still believing in Santa Claus, metaphorically speaking.
Right, believing in that purely external, solid reality that dictates to you.
Exactly. And instead, you consciously recode your internal system to operate from your true nature, from consciousness and creative joy. A big part of this is identifying your thirst, those external seeking behaviors driven by fear or a sense of lack or wounding. Recognizing them helps you discover what truly brings lasting satisfaction, which is usually internal.
And the word should, you've tied that directly to our level of self-knowledge or lack thereof.
That's a great point to bring up, yeah. How much you feel you should do this or should be that. It often reflects your level of contraction, your entanglement in limiting programs. The more awake and integrated you become, the less you feel controlled by those external or internalized shoulds. True transformative mastery, as it's called, involves holding an all-integrative force. That means embracing all perspectives, including your own contraction and expansion, and even integrating the so-called dark arts, the pain, the trauma, the shadow aspects, recognizing them as a necessary part of that through the lotus process that allows the dream, the full experience, to unfold.
So embracing everything makes you untouchable.
Well, unshakable or unfuckwittable, as the source puts it somewhat bluntly, because you realize you are the origin of all models, all perspectives, all realities you experience. Nothing external can fundamentally threaten your core being.
So freedom isn't about escaping reality, escaping the simulation, but a different, more powerful kind of engagement with it.
Precisely. It's the realization that I have this paintbrush so I can paint whatever I want. This whole intersubjective drama, all our interactions and relationships, it's simply the observer consciousness relating with itself across all these different bodies, these different points of view. And this process leads to perceptual morphisms. These are profound, often irreversible shifts in your fundamental experience of reality, like seeing the world completely differently after an insight. Choice edging is another term used, highlighting the constant fundamental binary choices we make, often unconsciously, that push us further along our transformative journey, choosing fear or love, contraction or expansion, victim or creator.
Wow.
Ultimately, the realization that you are infinity, that you are consciousness, it's not an endpoint. It's not like you graduate and leave the simulation. It's an invitation. An invitation to continually explore, create, and authentically paint your reality from a place of freedom and joy.
We've certainly navigated some profound depths today, exploring digital metaphysics, uncovering how our consciousness, our internal programs, and our choices constantly shape the reality we experience.
Yeah, and if we just zoom out one last time, connect this to the bigger picture, the core takeaway is truly deeply empowering.
Hmm?
You, the listener, are the ultimate command prompt. You're the unmoving observer, internally simulating your stories. And this isn't just some, abstract philosophical theory. It's presented as a direct reflection of your true nature, something that empowers you to consciously design your experience moment to moment.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now?
Well, it means that distinction we usually make between the external world and our internal landscape.
Right.
It's far more fluid, far more permeable than you probably ever imagined. Your every choice, every belief, every focus is a command, manifesting your personal reality. So maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over, to take away from this deep dive. If all of reality truly is a self-reflective simulation designed by consciousness to explore information and understand itself, what is the single most compelling quest or adventure that you feel you are currently undertaking to gain deeper self-knowledge? And what do you sense is its ultimate, deepest reward? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to ponder. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure. Enjoy your self-reflective hallucination.